Good morning, everybody. My name is Rebecca, and I work for CCAR. I am the Director of Recovery Support Services, and for the last 3 years, I've been managing our telephone recovery support program. Can everybody hear me okay now? Okay. So, just to give you guys a quick kind of overview of what the webinar is going to be like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each slide, and then at the end of the slide, I'll answer any questions that people have. Okay, so let me get started. Right. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of telephone recovery support. CCAR has been doing the program now for, wow, let's see, about 11 years. It started in 2005 as a pilot program. And it really started, Bill White, who is a addiction researcher, came up with the idea of a recovery checkup phone call. So when people get out of treatment or, a formal treatment setting, usually when they leave treatment, their episode kind of ends, and there's usually there's not any contact with, clinical staff or whatever. They're told usually to, go to 12-step meetings or some other type of support groups. But many times, unless people have a connection already with the recovery community, they never follow through on that, or very rarely follow through on that. So the telephone recovery support calls are really to give people a connection with the larger recovery community. So, like I said, in 2005, CCAR started this as a pilot program. We started it in our Willimantic Recovery Community Center, and we partnered up with a local addiction treatment program. So when people left the program, they were signed up to receive calls. And what we found was that the people that um, received the calls, not only were they able to maintain their recovery for longer periods of time, but if they did have a relapse, they were able to get back on track that much quicker. Um, so because of the success of the pilot in 2007, our Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services started to fund this program for us. So does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, I'm just going to move on then. Let's see. Okay, so for the TRS program, the Telephone Recovery Support Program, volunteers call recoveries once a week to offer support, encouragement, and information about resources to help maintain their recovery. So, what I tell people that telephone recovery support is really built on the simple idea of one addict or alcoholic reaching out to another. It's that simple. And for our volunteers that make the calls, it's a great way to give back to the recovery community. And for the people that receive the calls, they receive support in their recovery. Does anybody have any questions so far? So, another little background about this, when we first started doing it, and probably for the first 5 or 6 years, we called people for 12 weeks. And and we used to tell people, we're going to call you once a week for the next 12 weeks. But what we found is that people wanted to wanted to continue getting calls. So now we call people as long as they want us to. And there's been some recoveries that we've been calling for, 3, 4, 5 years even. And they really, the feedback that I receive around that is that this is their connection to the recovery community. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I will Move to the next slide. I forgot I had put that graphic in there. So, it's a win-win for, the our volunteers that make the calls and the people that receive the calls. Um, my volunteers tell me that, it feels good helping other people. So it really enhances their own recovery by making these calls. A little bit about the confidentiality of the program. So one of the reasons why this program is so successful, in my opinion, is because it's non-clinical, you know. So it's like I said, it's one addict or alcoholic reaching out to another, you know, and the calls are confidential. So, you know, I'll talk about referral, how people get referred to the program in a little bit, but there's never any information shared, so what our volunteers talk about with the people they call stays between them. If our volunteers need support or need some help helping somebody else, they can ask usually a staff person in our center or another volunteer that makes the calls, but it's really kept confidential and it's not discussed outside of our organization. So, the person that is getting the phone call should feel safe and should feel that they can be honest, sharing about what's going on with them. And that's really why the calls are so powerful too, is that people can be honest. Sometimes when people especially are new to recovery, they have cravings, they have different issues that are going on with them, and if there's nobody to talk about that with, it's very isolating. Even if you have supportive family members or whatever, it's hard to share with your family member that you're having cravings because, they may think that you're going to run out and start to use again, you know. But it's also helpful to talk about that with somebody. And that's where our volunteers come in and that's where the magic happens. Um, so does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so we're going to go through this kind of quick. I hope you guys have questions. I'm going to talk about how CCAR does it. And, this program can be kind of tailored to your organization's needs, but there's some things that we've kind of found out through trial and error. And I'm going to talk about that as well. But at its core, this is a simple program, and we keep it simple as much as we can. Okay. So this is the consent form that we use. You can kind of review it as I go along, but what's important to see is that we don't ask for a lot of personal information. The name, we don't even need a full name. Sometimes people will sign up and it's just their first name and their last initial, or just their first name sometimes. The date of birth, I ask for because sometimes people will sign up, we'll call them for, a month or two, and then for whatever reason, we're not able to get a hold of them, or they say that they don't want to be called anymore. But then, a year later, 2 years later, that same person signs up again. So we like to keep, a contact history with people. So that's why I asked for the date of birth to kind of, separate people. We ask for a phone number, home phone, cell phone number, whatever, who they were referred by, their current housing situation, the city, state, zip, the gender, and you'll notice that in the middle of the form there's four different time frames to for people to circle, um, and these are the times that we try to call the people between. So we make the calls when our centers are open. So our recovery community centers are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We do have one later night that each of the centers are open for, but it varies by location. But when people sign up to get a call, they're asked to circle one of the time frames. We also have Spanish speaking volunteers, so we do offer this service for Spanish speaking people as well. And there's also a box too right next to the Spanish speaking only that says, "Do not leave a message on the answering machine." So sometimes people may be in a living situation where they don't want their recovery to be known about. They don't want other people to know that they're in recovery. So if this box is checked, if we call them, we just don't leave a message, you know, and that's really to protect people's privacy and confidentiality. And they're basically signing up for, they're granting us permission to call them. So this is kind of where, sometimes when I go out and I talk about this program, at a treatment facility or whatever, I get the HIPAA questions. This kind of this this is a self, they're signing themselves up. Even if they're in a treatment facility, they're signing themselves up for these calls. And they're agreeing and understanding the following. So, they're granting permission for us to call them. They know that when we call them, we're going to be asking about their recovery and how they're doing. If they need help finding local resources, the volunteer is going to help them find that. And more importantly, number 4, and this is hard to read, but it says that at any time that a person decides that they no longer want to be called, all they have to do is let us know, and we'll take their name off the list. So that's very important too, for people to know that these calls are optional, and we call you as long as you want us to. So people sign and date this form, and there's a couple different ways that this form gets to us. We have what's called a fax server. So people will fax it to us, and it comes over. I get it in my email. Let's put it like that, and I print them out, and I enter the people's names into a database that we use. Um, I also have this form can also be attached to your Facebook page, or I'm not sure exactly what kind of social media and things like that you guys have. But these forms I email to treatment facilities. I make sure that they're out in the community, they're in the recovery centers, so I try to keep these forms in as many places as I can. So does anybody have any questions about the actual form? And depending on what kind of data that your organization wants to collect, this form can be customized. So just to let you know that. And I see somebody is typing, so yes, so you will get this form. Every form that I'm going to go over in this PowerPoint is part of the package. So this form is part of the package, and if you see the little box down at the bottom, it says insert organization logo here. So it's really customizable for your organization. Okay, so I will move on. Oops, got it. Okay, excellent. So this is our contact script. Um, this is really built on what you think is important that you want to ask people when you call. Ours is pretty simple. So the initial contacts, there's a little script for our volunteers. The volunteer can say this, word for word, or they can kind of make up their own, opening line, is how I put it. But it's basically to let the people know that this is the telephone recovery support program, and that the person is a volunteer, and that they're going to be calling once a week just to check in and see how their recovery is going. Um, we do ask some initial questions. One of the questions we ask are you comfortable sharing what your drug of choice was? How is your recovery going? Have you been able to stay away from alcohol and drugs? What kind of supports are you using? It's really up to you guys what you think is important uh, during the phone calls. Sometimes with my volunteers, I let them know that the initial call can be a little, the initial call is really when you want to build that relationship with somebody. And sometimes people aren't really interested in answering a lot of questions. The whole point of this program is to keep contact with people from week to week, you know. So if somebody doesn't really feel like talking or things like that, that's fine. Is it okay if we call you next week? It's just to keep that contact with people in recovery and to give people support and encouragement, you know. So the contact script, feel free to use this. Feel free to make any kind of adjustments to it. Um, you know, I've actually made adjustments to it over the time that I've been managing the program. But this is helpful for the volunteers. So, um, does anybody have any questions about this form? Stacy, I'm having okay. Thank you. So this form is built to kind of keep track of your calls. So this is our contact log. So you can see that, somebody's name, you can put somebody's name, their phone number, home, cell, whether it's okay to leave a message, and that comes directly off their um, their referral form. Recovery ID, that's random. At one time we were doing this in an access database, and the database would automatically assign a number to people. So that's why that is there. I'm not sure how you guys are going to be keeping track of your calls. I think that until you guys start getting a large volume of people, that it shouldn't be too much of a problem keeping track of it with an Excel spreadsheet. I know Stacy is working on building a basic kind of access database for this, so that will be available for you guys to use. Um, CCAR calls between 500 and 600 people a week. So a couple years ago, we transferred over from a paper system to an all online type of system. And we use a type of software that's really built for salespeople and telemarketers, and we customized it to work for our telephone recovery support program. That was really because we do such a high volume of calls. In the future, you guys might want to think about that, but we do pay a monthly fee to use this software. But I can tell you that it makes, it's made the whole program run really efficiently and transparent too. But I can talk about that more at another time. But I think just to get you guys up and started for this, a Excel spreadsheet or an Access database would work. This is for your volunteers. So you can see that, data call, able to contact, yes or no, number of attempts, is the person in recovery, the recovery supports used. The recovery supports used, that doesn't necessarily have to be filled out every time that we talk to somebody. Whether or not somebody had a relapse and whether they needed assistance, around their relapse. So our volunteers are trained to help people find detoxes, to help people find treatment programs. You know, I tell the volunteers that they should really give people options. So if somebody is looking to to get into a detox or treatment, they should give them, 3 or 4 different numbers to call and things like that. And then you can see that there's a place for comments or stories. So, like I said, we call between 500 and 600 people a week. So we really try to, have our volunteers kind of scheduled around the time frames that people need to be called. But the same volunteer doesn't necessarily call the same person from week to week. So what I ask the volunteers to do is just to jot down a little note about what's going on with the person. So that way the next volunteer that makes that call can kind of know what's been going on and connect with that person that much better. So that's where the comments or it says stories, but really just what's been going on with the person, you know. And it could be something simple as, looking for a job or, trying to move to a new house or, having some health issues. It doesn't have to be a long, it doesn't have to be it, 1 or 2 sentences is fine, is what I usually tell people. So I see somebody is typing, so please let me know if you have any questions on this form. And again, all these forms that I'm showing, they can all be customized to work for what your organization really wants it to. So most of the calls are, I usually say they average about 5 minutes. Sometimes the call can be a lot shorter. Sometimes the call can be, how's your recovery going? Oh, it's going really good. I'm going to meetings. I have a sponsor. It can be a quick call or it can be a little longer sometimes. But I usually say the average is about 5 minutes per call. What we do also is that we attempt to call people 10 times. If we don't get a hold of somebody after 10 attempts, then we discharge them. That can also be up to you guys. We find that how it's kind of set up is that once we contact somebody, we don't call them again until the next week. Um, but until we make contact, we try them every other day. So usually 10 attempts can take somewhere around a month. So if we haven't gotten a hold of somebody in a month, then, we can assume that you know, they've switched phone numbers or, something's going on with them that we're not able to contact them. You can extend that to as long as you want, but we found that the 10 attempts works the best for us. Um, and a lot of times too, people, if they are still interested in getting the calls, they'll contact us and say, hey, you guys haven't called me. What's going on? And they can just sign up again for the program. Let me see. Wow. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, and sometimes the calls can be longer. It really depends. Sometimes the longer calls that we have are really around people that don't have any other support, people that aren't interested in going to meetings, people that may be in a rural location and can't get to a meeting or you know they don't have any other support besides these calls, you know um, but I usually say that on average the calls are about 5 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Can't seem to work this. So marketing, what we found is that I understand from Stacy that you want to get this program set up in at least 5 of your centers initially, which is great. Um, so there's a variety of ways that we have people sign up. So like I said, part of my job as the manager is I go out and I go out to different organizations, I go out to different treatment programs, providers, and talk about TRS. Now, because we get funding for the state, TRS is free, so anybody can sign up. It doesn't cost anything. Um, so it's a really what I tell people is a really great resource to offer people. You know, if they don't like the calls, all they have to do is say not to call them, and we just take their name off the list, so it's no big deal. Um, so we have our form. The consent form is also linked to our website so people can sign up directly online. The reason why that works is that our web form is connected to the database that we have that's online. So when somebody signs up directly online, their information goes directly into our database. But you can definitely attach the form to your website and have people fax it or even email it. Um, you know, they can fill it out and attach it as an email to somebody. It's really up to you. But I find that the more I was able to kind of go out and you know not just in the communities where the centers are, but in other communities and get people to sign up, the better the program worked. So one of the kind of growing pains that I can talk about a little bit with this program is that when we initially started up, um, the people that signed up in the communities or close to the communities that we had our centers in, um, though those are the centers that that called those people. But what we found is that sometimes the people that we were calling or the people that the volunteers were calling were the same people that they were attending meetings with or interacting in the community. And there was a couple instances where boundaries were crossed. You know so what I do now is that I kind of mix up the callers. So we have a center in Bridgeport, we have one in Willimantic, and we have one in Hartford. So I have our Hartford center calling people in Bridgeport or in Waterbury or outside of the Hartford area. So you don't have that risk of being a volunteer and coming across a name that you might know or coming across somebody that you go to meetings with. It just kind of keeps that, it helps with the boundaries and things like that. So does anybody have any questions about that or about how to market this program? Um, some of the questions I get, especially from providers, well, I get I get quite a few questions from providers. One of them is, so our volunteers, how long do they have to have? How much clean time do they have to be a volunteer and make these calls? And what I say is they can have a day. You know, CCAR as an organization isn't really concerned with somebody's clean time because we know that that's not really a good measure of somebody's recovery. You know, all our volunteers are trained. They're trained to make the calls, and part of that training, I talk about boundaries. I talk about confidentiality. So they are trained, but how much clean time somebody has isn't doesn't prevent people from becoming a TRS volunteer and calling people. Um, Another question I get too is, well, is it possible to have, women calling women and men calling men, separating the calls by gender? I think that could be a good idea but for us the volume of people that we call and because that this program is run really by our volunteers, it's just not really possible to do that, you know. We do the best we can. If we have somebody that that feels very strongly that they only want to be called by a female or a male, we'll put that information in the contact, the little note section, and the volunteer can, if they see that they only want to be called by a man or a woman, then the volunteer can ask somebody else to make that call instead of them. Um, Another question that we get too, or I get, is, does the same volunteer call the same person from week to week? And I already talked a little bit about that, that it's really, we try to do that. And the way the program is kind of set up is that if I'm a volunteer and I'm scheduled to make calls on Wednesday afternoon, and I talk to somebody on Wednesday afternoon, that person's name is going to come up to be called the next week on Wednesday afternoon, you know. So that's another reason why we schedule our TRS volunteers. We have a schedule board, and we really try to have people sign up and kind of, you know, keep that time from week to week. Um, you know, it's hard making sure that 600 people a week are getting their calls, but it's also very important, and that's something that I talk about a lot when I I train the volunteers. So let me answer any questions. So do you separate out coaching by phone as different then? Absolutely. So we don't do coaching by phone for a couple different reasons. I'm not saying that it couldn't be done by phone. It really depends on the level of your coaches. Some of our coaches do make TRS calls, but there are differences. So, TRS, like I said, it's a simple program, and it works because it is a simple program. So we don't do coaching by phone. What we do for coaching is done in our centers. And that's really so the coaches have the support of our staff if they need it, and also TRS too. So, our TRS phones are set up outside of the volunteer coordinator's office. So if somebody is on a phone call and they need some help or they need some support, they can just tap on the window and get the staff's attention, and um, and get some support and some help. So that's also very, very helpful for us to have it set up that way. Um, from Donna, we also include TRS form in our membership package. So I'm not sure what that is, Donna. In your membership package for your centers. Okay. So it's funny that you said that, because I was talking to Stacy when I first got in this morning. So we did a pilot with an organization in Massachusetts. It was just a one recovery center in Massachusetts, and they piloted the TRS for, I think, either 3 or 4 months. And at the end of that time, they decided that they didn't want to continue. One of the reasons why is that they never went outside of their center to sign people up. So what I say is that, you really have to, if somebody is coming into your center already, then they probably don't need phone calls as well. Now, everybody is different, and that might work, but to sustain the program, you really need more of you need more than just people that are already coming into the centers. But absolutely, you know, the more people, the better is what I find. And this program isn't just for people that are new to recovery. It can be people that just need some extra support. People that may not go to meetings, that may have gotten turned off of meetings. Just going through something in their lives where they need some support and encouragement from somebody else. So I don't want people to think that this is just for people getting out of treatment or whatever. It's for anybody at any point in their recovery. Um, we've also gotten some people that we've called, and because of them getting these calls, they've gotten interested in becoming a volunteer. So they've actually come into our centers to get trained to call other people, so it does have that ripple effect. Um, so I don't see any more questions. I think I'm almost done with the PowerPoint. Okay, just make sure. I'm sorry, I just cannot use Stacy's high-tech mouse. I don't know why that keeps doing that, but let me try this one more time. All right. Okay. All right. So, does anybody have any questions for me? This is the first time I've done a webinar like this, so I don't want to, I hope I'm not leaving anything out. But again, you know, it's a simple program, and we try to keep it simple for people. Um, a little bit more about the referral form. So, let me see if I can. It's probably there. We go. The consent form. So the line that it says referred by, what I train the volunteers to do. Um, you know, when I go out and I go to treatment programs and I talk about this program and I give them the form or whatever, I always say to them, I said, this is great for somebody that is discharging, as part of their aftercare plan. But people do what they want. So sometimes this actual form winds up in their intake paperwork. So if somebody is going into a 30-day program, and they get this and they fill it out on day one or day two, where they're filling out a million different papers, and they still may be detoxing. When we call them, they don't know, they don't remember signing up, they don't know who we are, how did we get their number, things along that line, you know. So I train our volunteers to kind of look at who referred them or the referral source, and try to jog that person's memory. Oh, so when you were in Blue Hills treatment program, it looks like you signed up for it. And sometimes, just jogging somebody's memory and just explaining the program a little bit is enough to kind of, um, get them excited, and get them, to want to get the calls. I also say a lot of times where, let people know that the calls are confidential and they're optional. So at any time, if you don't want us to call you, you just let us know. And they're confidential. So even if they were referred by a treatment provider, sometimes we get referrals from probation, sometimes we get referrals from DCF, which is Department of Children and Families. We never share information with our referral sources unless we have a signed release of information, which rarely happens, so you know a treatment provider or probation officer can't call me and say, hey, I referred this person to telephone recovery support, are they still in recovery? I can't give them any information. I don't share any information unless they fax me a release of information first. So I think that really helps people to know that it is confidential, and that we don't share information, because the calls really need to be honest. Somebody, they should feel safe sharing what's going on with them. So training your volunteers to know that, training your volunteers to, especially during the initial call, to explain the program to somebody is really important in getting somebody to actually um, want to get the calls and continue getting the calls. So does anybody have any questions? I don't see any questions. So this webinar was scheduled for 2 hours. I knew that it wouldn't take 2 hours. but this is going to be recorded, so at any time you can look this over. Anytime you can reach out to me or Stacy. The next webinar that I'm going to do today at 1 o'clock is around training your volunteers. And like I said, it's really important, and you know the the better trained your volunteers are, the more these calls are effective and helpful. Um, and it doesn't come, some people, I can tell you, there we have some volunteers that they pick this up, and they are so great on the phone. They're able to engage people, they're able to really really connect with people. And others, it just takes them some more time you know so a lot of times with our volunteers, I not only will go through training with them, I'll have them sit and shadow somebody else, until they feel comfortable. So it takes different lengths of time for different people to do that. But so if nobody has any more questions, I will hopefully see you guys and stuff at 1 o'clock for the training around your volunteers. Okay? Oh, I see somebody is typing. I'll wait just in case it's a question. A lot of people are typing. Thank you guys. And like I said, oh, you need an invite to the training? Stacy can. Okay, excellent. And, and at any time, feel free to call me. Um, my contact information, I believe, is on the front slide. If it's not, you can just reach out to Stacy or yeah. Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. And if anybody thinks of any questions, feel free to ask me at the 1 o'clock training as well. I have no problem with that either. All right. So thank you, everybody.